unless you're kind of trying to evolve and grow and get better at things that kind of scare you, life isn't really worth living. So this is something that, kind of freaks me out, or did freak me out.
Welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. I'm Matthew Pioro. You just heard from Svein Tuft. After that clip, I hope you're asking yourself, what could possibly freak out Svein Tuft? He is, after all, the guy who once used a broken hockey stick to chase away a wolf that was menacing him and his dog. You'll find out more later. Tuft retired from professional road cycling at the end of 2019. In November of 2020, the Langley B.C. native moved back to his hometown with his family after living in Andorra for 8 years. In our discussion, he gets into all the reasons and challenges of that move, and he gets into what he likes about being back in BC and what he misses about the small European country that he used to call home. Things have been pretty busy for Tuft in his retirement. He has a new podcast called Back on the Bus. He hosts it with Ryan Anderson, his former teammate. In March, Tuft and his wife Justine welcomed their second child, Heidi, who is the little sister to their son Gunnar. Tuft talks about the tricky business of balancing his drive and passion for exploring on his bike with the importance of being home and raising children. He also discusses why a job as a sports director with his Old World Tour team wasn't for him. He has ideas about what can make older riders with day jobs faster, and he tells a bit about a book that is forthcoming all about the rider himself. We cover a lot of ground. But first, we start with some practical advice concerning bikes and skis. Before we hear from Svein Tuft, I'd like to introduce the sponsor of this episode. The sponsor is MS Bike. I have been impressed with the way the charity ride has pivoted during the pandemic. It's gone virtual while still fostering a strong sense of community that a good ride can do. How is it virtual? It's the two Zs of our time, Zwift and Zoom. There's also an outdoor training series that will come to you via Ride with GPS and Strava. The big day is Saturday, September 18th. The whole MS Bike community will come together for rides that they choose or with routes that they chart for themselves. This is a great event for all abilities. I know there are a lot of new cyclists out there. This is an excellent way to have fun riding and help out a great cause. 60% of adults diagnosed with multiple sclerosis are between the ages of 20 and 49 years old. In Canada, 43 is the average age of an MS diagnosis. I know many of you listeners fall in that age range. So help out. Register and start fundraising now at msbike.ca. Svein Tuft, you retired from professional road racing at the end of 2019. Yet, you seem pretty busy in retirement, especially lately. I want to start by discussing a video that came out in early April that featured you fat biking on snow with fully loaded panniers and touring skis in BC's Cascade Range. The first thing that popped into my head when I saw that was, what is the best way to strap skis to a bike?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I struggled with that for quite a long time, trying to get the perfect setup, because one of the things that is tricky with, well, there's a few things that are tricky with that. It's trying to make it so it doesn't chafe your legs, and then also not totally trashing your skis. So yeah, it took me a while with the racks and all the bags and everything like that, but I finally got a system that was pretty slipstream. If you can get the bindings behind the seat, then basically the skis nowadays, I mean, especially these ones, they're not very thick. So basically where your legs are passing by the top tube, you just cinch that down real tight, and it's only adding, a couple centimeters either side to the actual bar. So that gives you your space there. And then a few straps under the seat rails, and a bunch of packing foam really helped do the trick, and some Gorilla tape just to kind of keep everything like cinched up tight. You don't want things moving, banging around, and you also don't want any of the surface of the skis touching any metallic parts, because when you're doing like a longer ride on rough roads, you just destroy your edges and, and start, like cutting up the PTEX on the base of the ski. So yeah, it took me a while though.
Tell me about the types of bags you used. Why did you opt for panniers? Was that because of the load that you had to carry?
Yeah, winter adds a whole other element of bike packing. I would say, when you compare that to what I can get away with in the summertime with a frame bag and a seat pack and a handlebar bag, you can basically fit everything you need. Just some extra storm stuff, things like that. But in the winter, you just need so much more because everything gets a little more just maybe extreme without sounding too crazy, but the elements just add that extra bit of stress to life. And when you're -5, -10 all day and you're doing activities, doing work, you need to pack quite a bit of extra stuff in the way of cooking and good tents and sleeping bags. Everything gets a bit bigger and bulkier. And that's where the panniers really come in handy, because you can just load those things up. And not to mention, you need your ski boots in there. And they're just kind of useless, bulky items, until you get skiing anyways.
The area shown in the video was your old stomping grounds. You explored around there more than 20 years ago. What was it like riding there this past February?
Since we've come back in November, we we had a lot of our stuff coming from Andorra in a container, and I was just anxiously waiting because I'd be watching the snow fall in the hills, and all my ski equipment, I'm a bit of a ski nut, it was coming in this container, and it was getting delayed, and I was starting to lose it, because I wanted to get out in those hills and get exploring again. And it came, I think the container came mid-December or just before Christmas, and I tell you, it was wild just getting back out there and that nostalgic feeling again. It's weird seeing it through, so I have those memories of what it was, and then now I'm looking through these eyes that have experienced a ton of other experiences and just kind of see things a different way. And so at first it was a little because I lost the love of skiing in the Pyrenees. I hate to say, I was, what I love about BC is the big snow, the big trees, and just the wild terrain. And in the Pyrenees, it's dry. It's barely snows. Most of the time you're skiing over rocks and gravel. I was just losing the passion for it. And it was weird because my first few trips out, I was just like, oh yeah, I'll just go out for a burn and check out some of the old areas. And instead it just fired me back up again for this crazy obsession that I have with it. And basically my entire winter was filled with just trips every week, maybe 2, sometimes 3 times a week, going back to some of these old places. And then with all of the stuff that I've learned in between, just exploring and going further now. And I've just been absolutely loving that whole process.
You mentioned your move back to Canada from Andorra. You had been in Andorra for 8 years. What prompted that move?
Yeah, coming back was a long, hard decision. We were starting a business over there in Andorra after I retired. Took some time, and then I started getting fired up on the idea of getting the gravel tours in the Pyrenees going. So I started Tuft's Adventure Tours, and I was working on a shop. I had, everything set up to go. And it was pretty wild timing. Basically, as everything was coming to completion, I was just about to hire some people. The pandemic set in, and at first you're thinking, oh, well, a couple weeks like this, and then we'll get back at it. And then, months go by and we're sitting there going okay, well, we've been away from family and Canada for all this time, right? And it was always in our minds to come back. But this just kind of sped things up. Getting back to family and raising our kids in Canada, I think, was also really important to us. And it just seemed like the time to do it. But it's very easy to avoid when you're living that life over there because, we'd created a life there. Our boy was born there. And, that was our house. That was it was a great place to live, right? So it was very easy to avoid that move. And looking back now, when we talk about that move, it's so epic. I don't recommend it to anyone moving internationally. It's incredible the amount of stress and bullshit you go through.
Especially after setting down roots for 8 years. That's 8 years worth of your life that you have to move.
Exactly right. Yeah, and you're amazed at the amount of stuff you acquire in that time. It's mind-boggling.
What do you miss about Andorra?
There's a lot of things I miss about that part of the world. The accessibility, like we lived at 1,600 meters, and the road that we lived on it went into Spain. So basically, you did this beautiful climb from my house for another, I think it was another 12K of climbing, and then you reached the Spanish border, which is just the road turning into gravel, and then you descend down into this big valley, Val d'Aran, and you're back down at 700 meters in this valley. And from there you can go into France, and there's just a million old roads and goat trails and so much stuff to explore just in that little area. And I would say that with mixed with like the very temperate weather, right? Like it's very Mediterranean influence, so that's why those mountains don't get the snow. I mean, they get some wild weather every now and then, but nothing like in BC, right? In BC, when you're at 1,600 meters in the middle of January, you're generally freezing your nuts off. And I think of in the Pyrenees, most of the time, that time of year, I've been in t-shirts, at that same, just enjoying the sunshine. So they both have their interest to me, but if I was going to say anything, it's just that accessibility into the backcountry is just, and it's very simple, right? Like, whereas I look at what I had to pack along on this ski touring trip, right? It's just so much gear, which is cool in itself, but it's a lot of stuff to lug around.
One of the reasons you stepped away from professional road cycling was to spend more time with your family. Your son Gunnar was about 2 years old when you retired in 2019. Even though you've retired, you still spend a good chunk of time on your bike. How do you balance the importance of family life with your strong desire to explore?
Yeah, I mean, that's another great one, great thing to deal with for especially, athletes we've kind of been hardwired to just kind of look after number one, look after yourself and always be concerned about your recovery and how are you feeling and all that shit. And I think that's a really detrimental way to go through life. And I think that's probably one of the best things, children have brought into my life is to really kind of face that aspect of yourself and understand that right now they are number one. They're the most important thing you'll do now from this point on. But in saying that, you also have to respect who you are and never kind of turn your back on the things that made you who you are. And if you're passionate about those things, you still have to do them. And I think that example for your kids is also very important. So there's a tricky balance in there because you can't go running off doing your thing constantly. And what I've noticed is, even though like in my mind that's what I think I'd like, as soon as I leave, I'm missing them right away. So it's just that part of life, right? So I know for myself that is the most important thing that I'll be doing. But I do know for my own sanity and just being who I am, I have to go and still challenge myself and push myself in these ways. And I think that's how I can bring the best to my family, when I get those little moments where I do the stuff that are kind of essential to my core.
Near the end of March, you and your former teammate Ryan Anderson released the first episode of your podcast. It's called Back of the Bus. I think I know where this title comes from because Ryan used that phrase on this podcast last fall. But remind us what the back of the bus means to you and Ryan.
Well, the majority of my career, I spent all of the time in the back of the team bus. When I was on Green Edge, when I was on Garmin, I just found it was like, it's funny, like different bus layouts have their quirks and their characters. But I just always found it was the most quiet. And it was the place where people came back to talk about real stuff, right? And up front is all the action, the coffee machine, people bashing around, directors stressing about the day, and you just get caught up in everyone's weird energy. And in the back, like you try and get some like-minded people back there. So it was a time to relax, because I always liked that calm before the storm. And there was always the best discussions back there. You like what I loved is you would be talking about other things aside from the bike race, right? So I always tried to attract different people down there. And then, the year Ryan and I spent on rally, we had a bus, and Ryan and I would sit back there quite a bit and just shoot the shit, and I've known Ryan forever. Going back to, I think one of the first times I came across him was 2006. So yeah, we go a long ways back, and he's someone I really respect. And so it was actually great. I mean, those are some of the best moments and memories of that year that I rode on rally. It's just hanging out back there and talking about, just life in general, and I think that's really important when you're doing such an intensive job like professional cycling. You need some places to just decompress a little bit and kind of reflect on that crazy job you're doing.
How did the idea for that podcast come about?
I think we have a perspective, I know just from our discussions, we look at things differently than maybe a lot of others do. And we have that kind of inside knowledge of professional racing. And I think we're both kind of aligned in how we look at things. And I think we just really wanted to share our experiences out on the road, and then get athletes and hear their stories, in the sense of, because I think it's amazing, like the people who really make it into the professional world of cycling, especially Canadians. I find their stories are really fascinating, because it's not always so straightforward, right? It's quite often a lot more struggle than it is for young Belgian kid with a ton of talent, and to fight your way over and go move over there. And there's something in there extra that I think really kind of makes them stand out in my mind. And I think that's the most fascinating part for me. So I think we both kind of share that same passion. One, sharing those stories from out on the road, but also kind of figuring out what makes people tick.
In 2020, you appeared on Flow Bikes for many of their watching parties during stage races. And I'm thinking you're also doing podcasting. You speak a lot for various events and stuff, and you're doing interviewing. Does this all come naturally to you?
Man, if you told me 20 years ago, or even 15, 10 years ago, there's no way. Like I'm massively introverted. So it was never on my radar, any of this stuff. But what I think what I find in life is that you always have to challenge yourself with new things that kind of scare you, like, so public speaking always kind of freaked me out when I was younger. I hated the idea of it, and what I found I would say so this is what I try and tell kids, like in cycling, for example, when you're trying to go through the path of becoming a professional and all that stuff, right? The odds are, like, whether you make it or not, it's really hard to say, right? And the odds are pretty slim. Let's put it that way. But what I always try and kind of harp on is the fact that all of these things that you'll learn along the way will change you and make you ready for whatever else you do in life, and make you better at those things, because you have that drive and determination to figure out how to do that stuff. And you're challenging yourself all the time, right? And I guess that's my biggest point, is that I changed a lot throughout my career. People have stories of who they think I am, or just, it's kind of out there that I'm a certain way. But I think that unless you're kind of trying to evolve and grow and get better at things that kind of scare you, life isn't really worth living. So this is something that, kind of freaks me out, or did freak me out. And now it's something I've become a lot more comfortable. And then when you open that door to those things, you just get more practice. And it's like anything, right? You do something enough, and without even really trying, you're just kind of a little bit better every time. And then if you do have that kind of critical aspect in yourself, which I think most like athlete type people do, you're kind of your harshest critic. You'll find you can just get better and better at it for whatever your level is. And for me, I'm starting at the rock bottom, so can only get a little better, right?
I don't know. I think I've like I've seen those watch parties and I've heard you speak. I think I don't know. I think you're finding your niche as an interviewer. That's for sure. But I do want to pick up on a talk that you did recently. In mid-March, you gave a talk for Global Relay Bridge the Gap. Can you remind us what that organization is and why it's important to you?
Yeah, so Global Relay was founded, I can't even remember the dates, 2012, I think. And that was, Ryan's connection to the Gastown Global Relay people. And so it's, Andrew Pinfold, Ryan Anderson, myself, Aaron Willick, Will Routley was one of the originals in there. And then Kevin Field, they're all part of that group that tries to basically bridge that gap, get those kids a chance when they need it. Like, cycling's such a crazy sport that way. When you make it, you have more than enough resource, right? You have almost too much. People are bending over backwards to help you. And when you're at that level just below that, people don't even know who you are, or you're barely getting any help whatsoever, right? And sometimes just a flight somewhere or a bit of cash to help out with a training camp is the difference between making it on a team or not. It's been an awesome program to be a part of. This, just seeing a ton of kids come through there and actually make it to the next ranks, or just grow up to good people, right? Like I said before, it's not always clear you're going to make it, but in those years you learn so much. So yeah, I think it's been a really satisfying thing to be a part of. And then speaking with Kevin Field and Rich Wolves about trying to get more of these talks going, right? Get that discussion with the kids, because that's one thing, and going back to your question about like a podcast, is like, it's just none of this information's out there. And I feel like, when I came up, I was just lucky I had some older guys who kind of just gave me some rough information, but you still had to find your own way, right? And no one actually knew anything about those steps that I was making at the time, or at least the people around me. I probably could have been a lot better at reaching out to certain people, but that's just it. If you don't have access to those people, it's really hard. So the other great thing that Bridge the Gap does is we have all these mentors now. So all the Canadian cyclists who are professional or have had a career, they're now part of this group that works with our athletes that are making those next steps. And so you kind of stay in touch with your athlete for maybe 2-3 times a month, and just see how things are going, what's going on, like what's their next plan, and they have questions, you're always there. So yeah, it's been a really cool process, and I just think we need to grow that more and more, because Canadian athletes in general need all the help they can get, especially in a sport like cycling that's not mainstream.
In that talk, you advised the young riders listening that it was important to let one's legs do the talking, and it's important to be humble. And I thought I might dig on that one a little bit, because athletes today aren't just athletes. They are on social media. Many have become brands unto themselves. You've seen this phenomenon grow throughout your career, and all of that is very off-bike work. And I'm wondering, does the brand ambassador work that riders have to do, does it run counter to ideas of humility and just letting the legs do the talking?
I think more and more it's becoming a stronger presence. Like, I think riders are starting to realize that they can work a lot on that side of things and still have a job in cycling. But the crazy thing about professional cycling is, no matter how recognizable you are, in the end, if you can't help your team or get results or whatever that's required of that team, you just have to move on, right? It comes down like, teams definitely love that presence, right? They love the balance of the person who can mix all those things together, have a great social media presence, and then win races or be an awesome teammate. But the reality is, if you aren't focusing on the bread and butter of that job, forget about all that other stuff, in my mind. And I know I might sound like a crusty old guy, but that's the reality of that job. It's too frigging hard. And talking to my friends in the World Tour this year, it sounds like it's even gotten harder. The desperation of contracts and what could happen, and the calendar has no races. The races that are non-World Tour now have like 10 or 12 World Tour teams in them. So that pro Conti level, those guys are struggling the most because they don't actually have many places to shine. So the risks are getting even more important to take, and that means the racing's more dangerous, it's more intense, it's more crazy. So if you're too focused on your social media, it's going to be tough out there. Let's just put it that way.
I want to link a few things. Some maybe they're elements of your podcast, maybe they're elements of your Bridge the Gap talk. But in your podcast, you and Ryan mentioned Vincenzo Nibali. You say he's not just a watt machine, but a very versatile rider. Is it possible to develop a rider like Nibali here in Canada?
Well, I believe we have talent pools that just don't even ever, those kids never even get exposed to cycling. I think there's a lot of Nibalis in the whole world that just never get the chance to get on a bike and show those kinds of talents. And, you know, when you're looking at 7 billion plus people, if everyone got a chance to ride a bike, I would hate to see what the world tour would look like. It would probably be even faster and crazier. So, yeah, I think we have all the talent we need here. It's just we have no real systems to kind of weed those kids out and get them in a good, healthy relationship with the bike, right? And I think that's one of the crazy things with all of this data and social media stuff is that it's hard for younger people to have a healthy relationship to that training and racing and biking. You know, I think back to my earlier years and I just loved biking so much. I didn't really care. If the racing didn't work out, it didn't matter. It was biking that I loved to do. And with that, it was pushing myself on the bike. So I was lucky that those things kind of worked out in a certain way. But yeah, I think we have that talent out there. But like I said, it's gone are the days where you can just be like, I mean, it helps to have those watts, but I've seen a lot of guys who in a lab are just the kings, like just your mind is just blown. And then you put them on the bike and they can't finish like the race. And you're just kind of scratching your head going, what happened? You know, it's not easy to kind of mesh those two things together. It's a big ask to get an athlete like Nibali at the end of the day, someone who can climb like that and descend like that. And then time trial half decently. And yeah, I mean, and he's not even the most talented rider of all time. So, I mean, I was just using him as an example as like just this crafty Italian fella who's just got this good blend of all of these things, right?
Sure. Now we have the Matthew van der Poel and Wout van Aert who continue to blow everybody's mind.
Yeah, you go into those guys and I don't even know where to start. You know, it's just incredible watching these guys.
I have another slightly theoretical question for you. You started road racing at about 23. If the gravel racing scene as it is today, with events like Unbound Gravel or Mid-South, were around in your early 20s, do you think you might have gravitated more toward them instead of road racing?
It's possible, but I think part of the gravel racing side of things is you got to be pretty like savvy in the whole connection scene and like kind of doing your own program. And I just don't know if I cared enough in that time to actually do that. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know if I had like the technical savvy and like I said, I was highly introverted. So calling someone would be a big deal for me, right? And because you needed that help. And one of the things road racing provided is like you could just show up and get your ass handed to you and then kind of go home and like there would be like a crit the next day or a time trial and local stuff, right? That was just always present or a Tuesday night race. And that could really help me kind of just figure out what I was doing and if I actually was capable. Whereas these gravel races, as much as I think they would have suited me probably way better and just my ability, because like just grinding for 10 hours seems like a much more suited thing to me than dynamic road racing. Like so yeah, I just don't know if I would have had the mentality to figure it all out at that time of my life, right? Because I'd basically come out of being a hobo and living in the mountains. So yeah, I was not super savvy when it came to all this other contracts and trying to figure out all that stuff.
Right. I could totally see that because the Tuesday night race, you can, show up on your own time or in your own space.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do and then and go. But like a gravel event is a whole Well, it's a bigger time investment. It's a bigger production that you're going to get involved in.
Yeah. And I think of like starting out, my equipment was so rubbish. Like you can't take a crappy bike on a 10-hour gravel race, like, and really put it through a race, right? Like you can ride through that course and pick your lines and take it easy. But a race is a whole other can of worms, right? You're just smashing through potholes and bashing rocks and, taking risks on descents. I don't think any of my equipment would have been capable of making it through with what I had money wise and all that stuff. I had just the very basic stuff. Whereas road racing, as long as you don't crash, your stuff is going to make it through the day, right?
Svein Tuft, you are into your second year of retirement from pro road racing. What has surprised you about retirement?
Yeah, that's something I've talked about a bit. I think one of the things about retirement is that you are never going to be prepared for what it is. You think you have this idea of what it's going to look like, but the reality is until it happens, you have no idea. And it's a bit shocking because it's so awesome in so many ways and kind of it's kind of hard to explain because your life up to that point, your value has been put into your days on the bike. And you can go and smash yourself for 4 or 5 hours. And if it was a great day, you just feel awesome. There's nothing else that day needs to provide for you. You just got a smile on your face. You're thinking about recover, and then you're planning your next day. And that's that simple life of being a professional athlete, cyclist. And then you step out of that world and you're kind of, you no longer have that goal, right? I lived in these cycles. I lived in this world of, the season would come and end. It would be world championships would usually be my last race. And then come home, couple weeks, and already you're starting to plan, 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks goes by, and you're thinking, you're doing these activities and then you start training again. And the whole thing, training camp and then the first races. And it's like you're always looking forward, right? And as much as that was simplistic and I loved that rhythm of life, life went too fast. And a lot of it was just passing by so fast. So you have to stop that at some point, right? That's not a sustainable way to live. Also, your body can't keep doing that. But yeah, when you don't have that in your life, there's a big hole, and I can see how it would be easy to fall into some pretty bad traps. And I just was lucky that I still loved biking so much, and mostly I loved the adventure, bike packing, and just doing trips. My last years as a rider, I was just doing 4 or 5 day long touring trips to train. If I had a big block, I would go, I'll get that volume in through touring. I'd go through France and Spain and back and forth into the Basque Country, and it was honestly it just made me so happy, and I never lost that when I was done. So I think that was the most shocking thing was just trying to disconnect from that ego, that connection to that training and racing feeling, that dopamine high, that crazy energy you get from like feeling good on the bike. It was hard to let go of, but it's like everything in life. There's a time for everything, and you have to learn to let go. And the ego is a powerful son of a gun. It's easier said than done. Let's put it that way.
I'm wondering if there needs to be a bridge the other gap for cyclists retiring.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's a big hole in the game. I think that I would, like I said a few times, I'm pretty lucky in the fact that I was on great teams. If I wanted to work in the Green Edge group, the Green Edge family, it was always there for me, right? But that wasn't for me in the sense of being a director. I love the sport. I love my friends on that team, but sitting in a car and mulling about stage details, it's just, I can't do that. But that's also, it's not everyone has that retires, has that opportunity, right? So we have to help these guys because they're at a very vulnerable part of their life. And I think of the younger people, we're all concerned about the development of riders, and that is number one. But I'm going to say a strong number two is definitely looking after our riders as they step away, because as you might know from that sport is that it's just all consuming. Everything is about that sport in order to survive for some people. Some people can have a lot of side projects, but they're very rare. And so what happens is you're so wrapped up in what you're doing day in and day out that you're not really planning for anything else. And there's a danger in planning for other things, because as soon as you start seeing that that way out, that shitty day up in Belgium is going to be a lot easier to step into the feed zone and grab a ride to the bus, if you know what I mean.
There's not that extra level of investment that you need to perform at your best.
Exactly. You need to live and die by that kind of way of thinking. At least that's how I was. I had to be all in because it's just too hard of a sport. If you have a way out, it's not going to last long. You're going to take that option every time.
I've heard you're working on another project, that you're working on a book. A, is that true? And B, can you talk more about a book that you might be working on?
Yeah, working on a book with a friend who, he's been a journalist in cycling for many years from the UK. A guy named Richard Abraham. It's been a process. It's awesome. Like, it's so much work when I see what these guys have to do to compile all the information, and he's putting it in my words. So when I see what that is, it's mind-boggling, because that started basically right after I retired. We started getting into it, and the actual recording. So we used to just do like 2-hour, 3-hour long recordings of just like interview based recordings. And he has more words than he knows what to do with, and he's trying to edit it all down. And it's been an incredible process, because I didn't think I had that many stories or that much to say, and then you start opening up this can of worms in your mind. And yeah, it's been an incredible process, something that was really enjoyable to do, far more than I thought. And Richard's working hard on getting it finished up for possibly this season, or maybe in 2022. So yeah, it's a ton of work, and he's doing fantastic stuff.
What do you think you'll be doing this summer?
Well, I'm already looking forward to that. I have a lot of recon trips, planning different gravel routes, how they link up. That's one of my favorite things, trying to figure out how to kind of link up Forest Service roads here in BC, and maybe little hike-a-bike or / trail over the passes into the next valley. Connecting things is one of my favorite hobbies, and really kind of seeing the majority of the province. But on top of that, running the gravel tours. There's going to be 3 different routes, a coastal route, Okanagan route, and a Kootenay route. We haven't quite pinpointed the dates, but then the things that we do have locked down are the Tuft camps. And those are going to be 2 dates on the Galiano Island and 2 dates up in Eagle Pass Lodge up in Revelstoke. And these will be camps based more on performance, but trying to have fun while doing it. So kind of steering away from the typical training camp where you're just slogging out massive volume and totally crushed after every day. It's going to be more dynamic training. We have a friend and trainer, Paul Larson, who's a sports scientist, been involved with the Aussie program for many years, and just a world of knowledge. He's created a software called Athletica. And it's an AI type of software that basically is tracking all of your training and then adjusting on the fly. So, if there's a sickness or poor sleep coming up, then this software has the ability to adjust things. And I think that's really important in that whole coach-athlete kind of connection, is being able to kind of be flexible so you actually get the most out of your training. So yeah, we're going to be running these camps, and I'm really looking forward to getting people out there, because a lot of my later years, I was doing a lot of different practices. I was looking at cold therapy, grounding, and being in the sunlight, and looking at all of these other factors like yoga and all of that to add to what I was doing, instead of just this one-dimensional cyclist, legs up, watching TV, cycling, legs up, this cycle that, okay, well, it is conducive to the 25-year-old who's, life is being a professional cyclist. It's not conducive to the 38-year-old who has a family and still wants to race and be competitive, but doesn't have 25, 30 hours a week to train like these guys do and live like monks, right? When you're busy and you have kids, I mean, you can't do that kind of a life. It's just impossible. On your feet all the time. You know, you got to work, you got to do all these other things, right? So we want to bring that kind of holistic approach to training where you can actually get the biggest bang for your buck as far as time and then also family time and the things that are actually important. So we're really trying to bring that balance into the training and also to be in these beautiful environments. And so, yeah, I see my summer really full of those events, those activities, and then also just constantly exploring. And I feel like in life, you got to just stick to the things that you really love. And so far, I've been able to pull that off. So I'm just working to keep that happening.
Well, Svein, thank you very much for your time and catching up on all these various topics, some of them very philosophical. I appreciate your time. And yeah, I hope all your new projects go well.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
And that's the episode. It's written and edited by me, Matthew Piaro. I had help from web editors Terry McCall and Lily Hanson-Gillis. The Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast is produced by Adam Killick. He composed the music too. And if you have sharp ears like Adam, you'll have noticed that I made a mistake in the interview. I got one word wrong in the name of Tuft and Ryan Anderson's new podcast. It is called Back on the Bus. You'll find a link to it in the show notes. I should also thank Ontario Creates for its support. And thank you for listening. Please rate and review the show, ride safely, and I'll talk to you later.